stories. Before I became an SGA, the guy who had the position before me almost fought a customer. So the story goes, it was a dark Thursday night almost around 8 p.m. We have an older white couple enter the store and proceed to start looking around. Roughly 10 minutes later, two black guys walk in. They basically personify everything that you would consider ghetto. It's like they walked out of a 2 Chainz music video. Anyway, one of them repeatedly keeps saying a racial slur. So the SGA, Bob, politely asks to watch his language. The guy completely disregards him and says it again. So Bob says to him, "Listen guys, I understand that's a word that you are comfortable using and hearing, but there are other customers in the store that aren't. Can you please stop?" The guys say, "Whatever man, it's just a word," Bob says. "Regardless, you can't say it in here." The guy says it again, so Bob has had enough and asks them to leave. The guy obviously doesn't want to go and starts making a scene. He's a little guy, probably around 5'7", maybe 140 pounds. He goes up to Bob and gets in his face. "I'll knock you the fuck out right here, old ass motherfucker." Mind you, this entire time Bob had been leaning over the counter. Bob stands up, walks around the counter, and the guy soon realizes that Bob is 6'3", 250 pounds. His buddy that was there is already walking towards the door, and it's not until the ding from the door goes off that the guy realizes he's on his own and bolts. It was crazy as hell. I'll probably never forget that day. This happened 8 years ago. The company was in a completely different place. If you think hours are bad now, back then it was a weekday. You were lucky to have a closer. Most of the time, you only had 3 people that ran the store: manager, ASM, and third key, SGA. Was a weekday night, was closing by myself like normal, done most of the work for the day, and was taking a little break and organizing things behind the counter for the next day. I was by myself like normal, nothing was amiss. Guy comes in, nice shirt, good pants and shoes, and was asking about a PSP. We decide on what games he wants. I remember I needed his memory card. I turn around to get it. When I turned back, he had pulled a gun. At first I didn't process it. I was in shock. Then my instincts kicked in, and I realized what was happening. He said, "Put the PSP on the counter and back up." I just kinda stared at him for a minute. I didn't know how to react. He said it again, and my brain turned on. I put the PSP on the counter with the games and the memory card. He snatched it with his other hand and bolted. Kid went to jail for armed robbery of a gas station 2 days later. They found the PSP in his car, and I had to testify against him. Oh, and the gun he had was fake. He had it on him when he robbed the gas station. This isn't particularly crazy, but it did happen just yesterday. I got a call from a mother who sounded panicked and was describing her 12-year-old son to me. I thought for sure she was going to tell me he ran away and to call if he showed up. She proceeded to tell me that he was coming to the store to sell his DSi that had been taken away from him for poor behavior. She told me I couldn't take it for trade and I was okay to comply considering the situation and that the child was only 12. She then told me I needed to take the system away from him and send him away, and she would come pick it up. I was not okay with that. I thought about taking it in on a trade and then voiding it out of if and when she came to pick it up. The kid finally shows up and is interrupting me while I am helping another customer. His mother shows up before I am able to take the DSi away. I thought for sure she was going to yell at him and drag him out, but she is acting like she is giving permission to trade in the system. I'm so confused. I finally wrap up with the other customers and go over to the other register to figure out the situation. We talk about trade-in value and everything seems normal. She asked if she can meet at the side of the counter to talk and writes on a piece of paper, "I need you to take the system away from him and hand it to me." What the fuck? I didn't realize. What the fuck? I didn't really feel comfortable with this at all, especially considering this kid could go batshit crazy from his already questionable behavior in the store. I took the system from him and acted like I was inspecting it for a trade. I asked them when they bought it, and she said only 2 weeks ago. I told them if they didn't want the system, the best thing for them to do is to go home and get the receipt. I handed the device to the mother and she agrees to go get the receipt. They walk out of the store as the kid continues to get louder and louder. "Mom, can we do that? Mom, can we return it? Can we do that? Mom, Mom!" And I am left to feel completely weird and uncomfortable about that parent involving me like that. I once had an Indian family come into my store. They brought in a receipt and 2 games and said the games did not work and they wanted their money back. The receipt was about 3 months old. I explained that I could not return them because it was past the warranty and they had not purchased the year-long warranty. I explained they could trade their games in defective and pay the difference if they wanted a new copy of it. The husband nodded, so I went, grabbed the 2 games, came back, scanned them in, and traded his in as defective. I then informed him and his family that they owed like $24 or something. The dad looked outraged. I explained to him the whole situation to him again. I guess he didn't want to, because he took his 2 games, opened them, and literally snapped the discs in half, and then stormed off, leaving his mess behind. I still don't understand the thought process behind it. A guy came in trying to buy prepaid MasterCard's Visa with 2 gift cards that obviously had been from a massive amount of stolen games. He had been at another location the day before to do a huge trade of almost 100 brand new games that had all been sealed and unopened, plus a couple of games hadn't even been released yet. I think someone he knew robbed a shipment and they traded everything in for money to spend on prepaids. Sketchy shit. Also, being a female at EB, I'm in Canada, results in some interesting stories. A furry once made me climb up the counter to grab an Xbox so he could growl at my butt while wearing his tail. There was also foot fetish guy who would come in to pretend to play MLB on the PS3 and stare at my feet. Once he asked if I could take off my shoes. I was working alone on a very slow Saturday morning. Enter super drunk middle-aged guy. He seemed that he had been drinking since last night without getting any sleep in between. He came in screaming and waving his liquor bottle. He was so drunk I couldn't understand what he was screaming about. It seemed he was just angry with me for some reason. I was fucking terrified. I was so sure he was going to hit me with that bottle, so I hit the panic button that calls any nearby guard. By the time the guard came, the drunk guy had already left, screaming and cursing for no reason. Another one was when I was working on a very busy day. A dad and a son came in to get some pre-owned games. Suddenly, without warning, the kid puked all over the floor in front of our desk. Dad asks for some paper, and I brought him a whole roll of it, thinking he'd cleaned the floor. Nope, He just cleaned his son's mouth and left without a word. The whole store smelled like puke, and I had to clean it up myself. I quit a while ago, but my 2 co-workers were working at the time. The guy was one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet. He had the kindest personality and always had a smile on his face. A suspicious guy was loitering around the store, left the store to grab a club from outside, came back in and hit my co-worker over the head 3 times, took a bunch of iPods and iPads, and ran outside the door. My poor friend suffered a concussion and needed stitches. It looked absolutely awful. One of them, when I was still a GA and was closing with my SGA at the time, it was about 6 in the afternoon, and just for sake of the story, we work in a close to ghetto area. We will just say we get a mixed group of customers anyway. So the day goes on, customers are browsing in the store at all corners. Next thing we know, these kids bolt in the store, straight to the PS3 section. Before we could say anything to them, the mom comes in, a pretty big lady comes in, stumbles up to my counter, straight to me, and before I could say a word, she blurts out, "You got a stool?" I'm sitting there trying to keep the straightest face I could, with still showing a little smirk, and said, "I'm sorry, no we don't." So she sighs and continues to shop. She finally comes back to the register. We ring her up and she leaves. The moment that she steps out of the door, everyone in the store looks at one another for a second and burst out laughing. It was the funniest shit in the world. We were in tears along with half of our customers. Funniest day of my entire GameStop career. The weirdest day has to be the day that I opened alone. Typical day until a certain guy came in. I deal with a lot of kids asking about JRPGs, which I'm not familiar too much with, so I bullshit the dude. And he takes it as we are friends, I guess. So he chills at the end of my counter while I help customers really quiet. When we slow down, he shows me a drawing he literally just did and says, "You have really nice features, so I drew you for my fan fiction." I'm sitting here like, what the fuck? But I just kept my composure. He ended up leaving, and I had the most creeped out feeling of my entire life. Crazy shit happens in the city, man. Well, short of being robbed earlier this year just before close, my craziest story happened about a week or 2 after I got promoted to SGA. I was working one of my very first shifts as closing manager on duty. It was the last hour before close. Really haggard-looking older black man came in. I attempted my usual greet. I said hello as I saw him enter, and then I stepped out from behind the counter to approach and offer help. He calmly but threateningly told me to back off, so I did, but I offered to answer any questions or address any concerns if he needed anything. Shortly after, 2 kids that were related to him somehow came in, and his demeanor totally changed for the positive with them. After a while of letting them browse, the man asked me to come help him find a title on Wii for him. He sort of explains the type of game he wants, something similar to Wii Sports that offers a variety of activities. After a few suggestions, he notices the Wii U section right next to the Wii section in our store and asks why I didn't recommend anything from that wall since I didn't know. I asked him if he had a Wii U, and he got really bitter and mean again and said, "Of course I do! Do you think I'm poor or something?" From there, it just evolved into him accusing me of racism in a loud, half yell for like 15 minutes straight. Somehow I managed to keep my calm and continue being courteous and helping him. Instead of turning my back and running away, eventually the guy gets really sullen and starts apologizing profusely to me. He never specified any exact events about his past, but he kept alluding to having poor experiences. By the time he left, he had shaken my hand twice and expressed gratitude for the help I offered, even though he and his kids didn't buy anything. When it was all over, my GA was just staring wide-eyed at me and told me he was afraid I was going to get stabbed and that he was ready to intervene if things escalated physically. That's also the most restraint I've ever shown in my entire life, but I guess it worked out. It didn't happen on my shift, but the next day I was listening to the story. So the story goes that a customer comes in to check the PS3 section. The store manager and the SGA are on that night and work on getting the value tower and other things. Night gets busy and the guy is still checking out the games. The occasional or from his corner of solitude. The SGA goes up to him and asks him what has brought him in today. He gives the old, just looking around response. So after the customers clear out, the guy eventually settles on a game and promptly leaves, rushing out without grabbing his receipt. Happens. So they continue working on the promotionals. The manager goes to check a game from the PS3 section, and there it was, staring at the man. It, in all of its full framed glory, shined more than a black eye, the most massive turd ever fathomed. This putrid thing radiated. Its aroma was dizzying to the mind. Only the vehement of warriors could even hope to withstand this pungent odor. That is the craziest thing that I had ever seen. One guy tried to trade in a PS3 that had bugs crawling out of it and smelled terrible. He just left it. From what I heard, someone cleaned it up and discovered it still had the PRP warranty attached to it and defective exchanged it for another system. A lady came into the store and started accusing me of taking advantage of her son because he traded in some games. My SM at the time stepped in and took the brunt of it. Apparently the lady's son traded in his Wii stuff without the console to my SM, and she explained he wouldn't be able to use his Wii anymore. His dad came in later or the next day when they realized the system was useless and screamed at my SM, and she didn't reverse it. Then I come in and his mom gets on my case. I had no idea what she was talking about. There were other customers in there too. The lady was talking about us being a community and not taking advantage of the children to my SM. She ended up reversing it all. This lady seriously thought she was in the right, and I'm thinking, fuck you, lady. What kind of an example do you think you guys are setting, coming in here yelling until you get what you want? Another time, with the same SM, a group of kids came in and started browsing. One had a weird afro wig on, so it was strange, but whatever. My SM was talking to some lady trying to figure out if there was some program to get video games to kids with cancer. Then, out of nowhere, the kid in the wig starts screaming like a fucking Dragon Ball Z character. I didn't realize it at first. I thought he was having a seizure or something. The lady talking to my SM bolted like she thought she was about to get killed. Then I see one of the kids videotaping it. The screaming kid leaves, and one of the other kids said something like, "That's what happens when your parents do drugs," as they left. I look at my SM, and she's just as confused as me. The customer came back like 5 minutes later and was like, "I wanted to make sure you guys were okay." But the craziest thing has nothing to do with customers being crazy. I've had 5 DMs, and the last one hired this dude off the street as an SGA, and he apparently is immune to being fired. He has had corporate called on him a few times and used to piss off customers on a regular basis. If you're new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.